Hi everyone, thank you for joining me for another week of story time. I'm Mr. Garrett, and we're going to get started with our weather forecast. So you can get your weather window out, and we'll do the weather together. So the forecast for Thursday morning this week is supposed to be sunny, and probably not any clouds. It's supposed to just have sun and a lot of blue sky. So look outside in the window and see if you see any clouds. Because we might have a few, but mostly blue sky. It's supposed to be also really windy. So when I looked on the forecast, it had like squiggly lines. So usually that means that there's going to be a lot of wind. So you might hear some wind in the branches outside. Speaking of branches, we need our tree. And something we've noticed the last couple weeks, looking at the trees outside, we're starting to get some leaves. So they're still growing. They're not full leaves yet. They started out as buds, and they're slowly growing. So soon we'll have a lot more leaves on the tree. So put the branches in front of it because we can still see a lot of the branches. But we'll have to check that next week and see how the trees are doing. So look outside the window and see if the weather forecast came true, and then use your weather window every day to move the pieces around to tell the weather whenever you look outside the window. All right, now it's time for our story. All right, so the story for this week is called Daniel Finds a Poem by Micha Archer. I chose this book because April is National Poetry Month, so I figured we could look at some poems. So if you've read poems before, sometimes they rhyme, sometimes they don't, and they can look a lot of different ways. They're usually written in a way that's shorter than when you write like sentences and paragraphs, but sometimes they can be kind of long, or they can be very, very short. They can just be a couple words. So poetry is just a different way to write. But what did Daniel find here? A little chipmunk. So is that the poem that he found? I don't know. I didn't think a chipmunk was a poem. Let's figure out what's happening here. Special thank you to Nancy Paulsen Books for letting us read the book today. All right, there's Daniel. Daniel knows all the rocks, trees, and animals in the park. Talking to the doggy. There's a squirrel and some birds. Do you have a favorite park that you like to go to? See all the things that are there, all the familiar things. On Monday morning, Daniel sees something new on the park gate. A sign reads, "Poetry in the Park, Sunday at 6 o'clock. What is poetry, Daniel says. He's looking up at the sign. Ooh, look at that. What is that? Spiderweb, yeah. He looks up in surprise when he hears Spider say, "To me, poetry is when morning dew glistens." Ooh, dew, that word, D-E-W. Do you know what dew is? If you look closely at the strands of the spiderweb, you see all the little dots. So they're actually dots of water, little droplets of water. So if you walk outside in the early morning and you walk through the grass, sometimes you'll notice there's a lot of water. That's the morning dew. On Tuesday, Daniel climbs the old oak tree. He sees Squirrel. "Squirrel, do you know what poetry is?" He's climbing up and there's a squirrel. That's a really cool tree, huh? Looks like a good climbing tree. Poetry is when crisp leaves crunch, Squirrel tells him. Oh, so Spider thought, said that poetry was the way that the dew looks when the light hits it. Squirrel says poetry is the way that the leaves sound. So we're using our senses here. On Wednesday, Daniel calls into Chipmunk's hole. "Chipmunk, can you tell me what poetry is?" There's Daniel's face. He's looking down. There's a little chipmunk. You ever see chipmunks running around outside? They were always one of my favorite animals. Poetry. Poetry is a home with many windows and an old stone wall. So that's what poetry means to the chipmunk. That's where he lives. On Thursday, Daniel makes a boat with a leaf for a sail and watches the wind carry it across the pond. He calls quietly to Frog. "Excuse me, Frog, what is poetry?" "Poetry," says Frog, "is a cool pool to dive into." And that's exactly what he did. Splash. On Friday, Daniel parts the cattails and finds Turtle. Hello, Turtle. I have a question. Do you know what poetry is? And Turtle said, I think poetry is sun-warmed sand. Ooh, so the frog said it's the way that the cool water feels. The turtle's talking about how the warm sand feels when he walks on it. So not some of the another sense, the sense of touch. On Saturday afternoon, Daniel finds Cricket in the shade of the slide. It's the cricket. So what do you think the cricket would say about poetry? What do you think of when you think of a cricket? Yeah, I think of when crickets make, when they chirp and it kind of sounds like they're making music. Let's see. When the shadows are long, Cricket fills the air with music. Is this poetry to you, Cricket? Singing at twilight when the day is done? Indeed it is, Daniel. There he is. That night, moonlight fills Daniel's room. He hears a ooh. Leaning from his window, he calls to Owl. Owl, what is poetry? Oh, poetry. Poetry is bright stars in the branches, moonlight on the grass, and silent wings to take me wherever I go. Good night, dear Daniel, she whispers, and flies off into the night. Owl really likes poetry. On Sunday, the sun wakes up Daniel. He is happy when he remembers it's Sunday. Remember what Sunday was? It's the day that they were going to do the poetry reading in the park. Yeah. Today is poetry in the park, says Daniel. And I have a poem. What do you think his poem's going to be? I don't know, maybe all the things that he heard from the animals? Let's see. All right. Oh, there he is. He's going to say his poem to the audience. Morning dew glistens, crisp leaves crunch. There's a home with many windows in the old stone wall. Cool pools to dive in, sun-warmed sand to lie in. Singing at twilight when the day is done. Bright stars in the branches, moonlight on the grass, and silent wings to take me wherever I go. Wow, that's a beautiful poem that he made. Oh, and look in the background, we have the city, and he's in the park. And if you look closely, he's over here. Oh, the little animals, yeah. Looks like squirrel and chipmunk are listening. On the way home, Daniel stops to watch the sunset sky reflecting in the pond. That looks like poetry to me. To me too, said the dragonfly. There. The end. On the back it says, what is poetry? If you look and listen, it is all around you. Just like Daniel and the animals were using their senses to look and listen and sometimes to feel the things that were around them, and they felt inspired and made them feel a certain way, and then they wanted to put that into words. And a lot of times you can do that with poetry. So keep that in mind, and we're going to do our little activity together. So if you can take out your little activity packet, we're going to do our activity together. Alright, so in your packet this week, you'll notice that you have a few basic materials. You have a piece of white paper, you also have a piece of green construction paper. So if you don't have one of these packets, you can grab a piece of white paper, and if you have any construction paper around, you can grab that. You might also want some scissors and some glue if you have it, but if not, that's okay. So we're gonna make a short poem inspired by a shape. So I'm gonna first draw a shape that could be a lot of different things. So you can make whatever shape you want. I'm gonna just do a basic triangle like this. But you could make a circle, you can make a like a squiggly shape like that. You could do a trapezoid, whatever you want. I'm gonna stick with my triangle. So first I'm gonna cut this out. If you want to just leave it on the green paper, you can also do that. But I think I want to cut mine out and glue it on the white paper. go. And I'm going to save all the screen paper for another project because we have a lot left over. Alright, so now I have my triangle. So I'm going to put the triangle over here. I'm going to glue it on first. There we go. Cool. Now, remember in the story, it was all about poetry. Now, poetry, a lot of times, follows rules and rhymes, and you can kind of know what to expect with it, but it doesn't have to be like that. Not every poem rhymes, and not every poem sounds the same. Poetry is basically, if you're using words in a creative way that sounds kind of cool when you read it, and kind of makes you think about an idea, maybe makes you think about something in a different way, in kind of a creative way. It can come in a lot of different forms. Sometimes it's better to write sentences, but sometimes poetry is a really good way to say something. So we're gonna practice a very simple poem today, inspired by our shape. So I'm first gonna look at my shape and think about what this looks like, and I'm gonna think of 4 things that this triangle could be, and I'm just gonna write them over here, and that's how we're gonna create our poem. So you can use your shape and think of 4 things that your shape could be using your imagination. So my first one for my triangle, especially since it's green, is a Christmas tree. So if you want to write or ask a grown-up to help you write, you can start to make your poem. So I'm just going to write a Christmas tree. That's the first line of my poem. And do a little comma right after that. The next thing that this could be, I think a bigger thing that's kind of the shape. I think it kind of looks like a mountain. So I'm going to say a mountain top. And if you notice, I'm putting a capital even at the beginning of these lines, even though these are not complete sentences, because in poetry, the rules are a little different. A Christmas tree, a mountain top. So I have my two lines in my poem. I need a third one. Maybe this could be... Ooh, maybe this could be like a leaf that's kind of pointy. So I'm going to repeat the A and then pointy. Remember in the book, the animals had some really good describing words. Pointy leaf. All right, and I need my last line. And I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my crayons, and look at that. It almost looks like a triangle at the end of the tip of the crayon. So I'm gonna say a crayon tip. And at the end of my poem, I'm gonna put a little period. So this is my poem. A Christmas tree, a mountaintop, a pointy leaf, a crayon tip. So that whoever reads this poem can kind of try to imagine this picture as all of these things. So that's my poem. So you can make your own poem based on the shape that you made and the ways that you use your imagination to look at what you think your picture is. And then kind of painting a picture with words over here. And that's just a simple way to make a poem. And poems can look a lot of different ways. This is just one example. But feel free to have fun with poetry. I hope you enjoy the activity. So next week we'll be back at the same time, 10:30 on Thursday on our YouTube channel. We'll have a new book, one of the new books that we recently got at the library, called Water, Land and Water Forms Around the World by Christy Hill. This is a kind of a cool book because if you look inside, the pages are kind of interesting. So that'll be a lot of fun. And so we'll read that next week. And you can stop by the library anytime starting today and until next week to get your materials packet. and stop by to say hi and get some books. So I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Get some fresh air if it's a nice day out. And I'll see you all really soon. Take care, everyone.